Welcome to the Wake Before the Day podcast with my parents, Clark and Bobby. We're excited to talk about the Bible and the Holy Spirit adventures. Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for being with us. Today we continue our march through the book of Proverbs, picking it up in chapter 12. And so we'll talk a little bit more about themes and maybe group some verses together. And one of the things that we'll see throughout chapter 12 is this compare and contrast, whether it's laziness versus diligence, other ways, wickedness and righteousness. It's been all over the book of Proverbs, and it continues in chapter 12. So join us.
All right, first verse says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. If we operate out of pride, great movie. If we operate out of pride, we're going to hate correction and instruction because it's going to be a threat to our identity. Our ego. That's right. However, if we're teachable and you love the Lord and you love truth, we should be open and receptive to correction and to teaching and to discipline.
Yeah.
You think about some of the most successful people. For myself, I usually think athletics. Michael Jordan, I remember having a poster of him in this dark gym, and this is what it quoted. He said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed." And so it's interesting that Jordan is the best ever. He's the GOAT. Often credited failure, criticism, even being cut from his high school team as fuel for growth. And he viewed critique not as a threat, but actually as necessary for his refinement. And Tom Brady, greatest quarterback ever, said, "I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the strongest, and I wasn't the most highly recruited, but I learned how to handle criticism and I used it to get better."
Yeah.
And obviously he became one of the most successful, if not the most successful NFL player ever.
Yeah. There's a movie that the kids and I have watched, and the movie's called Meet the Robinsons. And it's just a funny...
Is that the dinosaur?
Yeah, it's just a kooky kid movie. But one part that the kids and I talk about still today is there's a part of the movie where the main character, who's a kid, fails. Like his project doesn't work. I think it's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich maker. Doesn't work. And everyone around the table just starts cheering. And they're like, "Yes, you failed." And he's like struck, like, "Oh no, what do you mean? Like this didn't work." And so that kind of mindset and thinking is active here in the Proverbs where,
Real quick, were they being mean to him, or were they celebrating like this is part of your growth?
Yeah, that's true. I should let you know. No, they were like, if you failed, that means that there's more work for us to do. Like we actually get to get to decide like, how can we help you, and let's work on it together. And the success, they're really, so much of the Christian life is this pilgrimage picture that it's the journey that we just keep moving forward. But if you're if you have a hard heart, if you're unwilling to heed discipline, if you're unwilling, if failure comes and you just collapse, those are actually Paul David Tripp calls moments of teaching and discipline opportunities of grace.
Yeah.
These are actually times where we can step in and the Holy Spirit can work just the same as he can in our successes.
Well, I feel like you brought some wisdom, which you always do, to our family and our dinner table. Where on the dinner table, we usually ask questions about like, how was your day? What was the highlight? Did something make you uncomfortable? Or how did you meet the Holy Spirit? But one of the things you brought up was to say, like, what's one mistake you made today, or what's one way you failed?
Or we will share. Or I missed it today.
Yeah, we'll model it. And the reason why is there are a few of our kids that are a lot like me that view failure as like, you can't. Like, I have to achieve, and the standard is so high, it must be excellent. If it's not excellent, then it's failure.
What do we do? Yeah.
And the truth is, like, that's not true. And you actually need to make mistakes. You need to accept that you're not perfect. You're going to make errors. You're going to sin. But modeling repentance, modeling a teachability is necessary for health and growth.
Yeah.
Verses 2 and 3 say, good people obtain favor from the Lord, but he condemns those who devise wicked schemes. No one can be established through wickedness, but the righteous cannot be uprooted. Now, challenge here. When you read these verses, you have to read them with an eternal lens, because when you read these and you look at life and your experience in the news, what you're going to identify quickly is that it doesn't feel like the good people are obtaining the favor of the Lord. It looks like the evil and wicked are winning. As we write this and as we do this right now, there's an ongoing case against a lot of very wealthy, successful elitists, not only from our country, but globally, who have harmed youth. And when you're watching it, you want justice. And honestly, there's a part of me that's kind of like, I don't think anything's going to happen. I think these people who hurt these others are going to get away. And the whole thing is there's injustice and a rigging here. But at the end of the day, if I read these verses, like thinking about the gospel and thinking about justice and transparency and the final say that's God's, that's where my heart has peace. And I can affirm what verse 3 says, that no one will be established through wickedness.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The next few verses, you'll hear the compare and contrast tone. So specifically in 5 and 7, and a little bit in verse 3 too. And so there's this compare and contrast there about the righteousness and the wicked, but there's really one unified movement. And that speaks what we've kind of already touched, I think, in Proverbs 10 and other Proverbs, about how our interior life really forms and molds our exterior life. And so what fills our heart shapes our tongue. And then what shapes, the tongue determines ultimately what we stand for or what we fall into. And so when we read these verses, we can understand that righteousness really begins like in the interior. It begins with like just intention. There's an alignment, there's a deliberation when it comes with walking in unity with what the Lord is willing and asking. And so there's a difference between lives built and started from that place versus lives that really begin and are cultivated in false intentions or impure intentions or deceitful intentions, and how then those things don't stay hidden. Just like your heart is shaping your tongue and then your tongue is revealing how you're going to stand or fall, so it is when they're not helpful intentions. That's actually what's shaping your tongue, and that's what we're hearing come out, and then that's eventually the kind of life that we see being lived. Yeah. And so you can see how there's this that's good public life that really is determined by a private life that's happening in the interior. And so if there's, deceitful intentions, then that's not going to be surprising with what we hear and what we see in people's life. And if there's intention that's been cultivated in a way that's righteous, then that's going to show up in someone's speech and in their life. Yeah. And so that's what we're understanding.
I think about the words of Jesus in Matthew 7 when he talks about like trees and their fruit.
Yes.
Matthew 7, he says, likewise, every good tree bears good fruit and a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. And so what he's saying there is what you're saying. And that's what the Proverbs saying, that the inner DNA will eventually become visible. Yeah. Now, will God honor that in the long run? Absolutely, he will. Does that mean that we're going to get what we want and have success and all that in our current day? It does not guarantee that.
Right.
But we remember that we're going to eventually answer this to the Lord. So these are general statements the author's making. But there's something I want to ping pong it back to you here. And you often talk about relinquishing outcomes.
Do I?
You do. Yeah, I'm not sure if that is like from your brain or you heard that from someone else, but I know we've talked about it and I found it to be encouraging and helpful, especially in ministry and parenting. Yeah. When we have expectations that are unmet, that leads to discouragement and frustration. But if we relinquish outcomes, what advice do you have for us, or what do you mean by that when it talks about the good of relinquishing outcomes?
I think we just understand our placement and our position better. And so when we walk into something and we're just looking how we can partner with the Holy Spirit, where is the Lord at work? How is his kingdom advancing? And I just enter in, then that's different than me trying to control and figure out what do I need to do so that this happens. Where the mindset, I think, when it comes to relinquishing outcomes is I'm just here to be obedient and do what the Lord is asking me to do in this day, in this time, in this place. And then what happens is actually up to him. And so this is actually from Dallas Willard, but he talked about how this totally transformed his public teaching, his writing, and other people then, now that that effect has trickled down, where there's freedom in just stepping in to be, who you are, even though other public opinions or maybe even my internal pressure, maybe some fear of man, what are these people going to say? These are all at play in our obedience unto the Lord. And he's saying, actually what happens isn't up to me. The Lord has that. And so, me actually resting in his goodness, his faithfulness over the moment, that actually means I get to participate in joy. I'm not participating from a place of anxious or, the need to control, because the reality is we just can't do that anyway. And so I think that term, relinquished outcomes, is often just replaying in my head. And it fits, it's not a biblical term, you don't see it in the Bible, but it fits so many narratives, whether it's in the New Testament or the Old Testament. And so one of them that we talked about a little bit here is Noah.
Yeah. No, I mean, when God instructs Noah to build a boat, I'm sure he had a lot of questions. And he's in the desert.
Yes.
And then the neighbors are probably making fun of and mocking him.
Yeah.
Yet he relinquished the outcomes and focused more on God and obedience.
And just what,
the other one that comes to my mind is Joshua. When Joshua is talking to the Lord, and the Lord's like, hey, I need you to whittle down your army. It's too big, because if you go to war, you're going to win and get the credit. Let's whittle that thing down from, I don't remember if it was 30,000 men down to 300 men, something like that. And again, if Joshua hadn't obeyed and relinquished the outcomes, I could see that would be an absolutely miserable experience. But when you relinquish the outcomes, you're just trusting God and focusing on obedience in him.
Right.
If you keep going now, verses 8 through 11 teaches us that true wisdom is not about just managing our image, but again, it's about faithfully, humbly, and obediently following God. Verse 8 begins with, a person is praised according to their prudence, and one with a warped mind is despised. Better to be a nobody, yet have a servant, than to pretend to be somebody and have no food. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. And so essentially what he's saying here is the righteous quietly work. They show kindness. Oftentimes you will bump into people and not even know like how successful or productive they are, because they're staying in their lane, they're grinding, they're faithful to the mundane, ordinary moments following the Lord. I remember when I had graduated, came out here, started internship. At this point now, I'm starting to experience adulting, like insurance, phone bills, these kind of things. I'm actually paying attention to numbers and dollars, and you're like, wow, this is important, And I remember talking to this guy, I'll call him Joe, and Joe was, talking to me about his life, and it seemed to be really good, and he's driving the nicest car. He always had the latest phone, always had the nicest shoes, and to my eye, as a younger man, I just thought, well, this guy's really successful.
He figured it out.
He's really figured this thing out. Where within a year, eventually we're having coffee at the local Starbucks here talking, and it becomes very apparent that he's in debt. He was buying things he didn't have. And even though he looked the part, his life was falling apart, and he made some really bad decisions. Now, on the other side of the coin, over this time, I've gotten to know people in our community that are super kind, but I began to kind of peel behind the curtain and get to see like how things worked in terms of like generous giving that was anonymous, that was getting kids to camp, getting couples to therapy, allowing things at church to be purchased. And I began to put together that these people who are just faithful in the mundane, ordinary, hardworking, are incredibly wealthy. But unlike my buddy Joe, they're content to just with the car they have, with the house they have, with how they're living their life. And that freed them up to be radically generous and used of God. And I remember just looking at that. And when I read these Proverbs, that's what came to my mind. They worked their land. They have abundant food. They were praised. They were prudent. They pretended to be no one, and yet they were very successful. And those who were pretending to be somebody eventually were out their home, out their job, out their clothes. They had to return things. I was like, man, I don't want that. So long story short, we have to build a life that's centered on Christ, that's focused on being obedient and receiving his love and loving him back, and not craving the things that the world shoves in my face. Dave Ramsey talks about spending money I don't have to buy things I don't need to impress people that don't really care about me.
Or I don't like.
Or whatever I don't like. So you're like, okay, so the image that the Bible will often give is that of a tree. And it's of a tree that has a root system that over time widens and deepens and is established and can withstand the craziness of the wind and the storms of life. And so there's not so much a call to dramatic and instant success, but actually a durable faithfulness. And like Eugene Peterson says, a long obedience in the same direction.
Right. I think oftentimes like that doesn't look fancy.
No.
That doesn't look like you said that so well that, you might look at two people and think like, oh yeah, that one's doing really well, but we don't know anything. Yeah. We don't know anything. And so good reminder there. Verses 10, 11, and 12 kind of continue the theme of just building a quiet life. They sound like this. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. Interesting. The wicked desire the stronghold of evildoers, but the root of the righteous endures. And so interesting, because even animals, you know, when it comes to like humility and kindness, we laugh about this. But there's people that just animals come up and you're one of those people. I feel like your dad, especially, like our dog just like rolls over. It's like, and other dogs, they just like, we'll be at the park and all of a sudden there's dogs just like coming. They have this inner sense, I swear.
But, this is a nice human being. I'm going to go talk to him.
I don't know. Or like they have food in their pocket or something. I don't know.
Probably that. But this guy smells.
Yes, there's something about this though. And the New Testament speaks of this too. Like kind of like mind your own business, work quietly and diligently with your hands. Yeah. And there's going to be enough for you, even in that small circle, for you to worry about.
Thinking about caring for animals, so we're trying to cultivate the Corver farm here in the inner city here. We have our golden retriever, we've got some chickens, we've gone through a couple guinea pigs, and they're guinea pigs, right? Hamster, sorry, they all look like rats to me. But we've gone through two, and we have had to do funerals in the front yard. And I remember there are people driving by. All the kids are just so sad standing out front. We got the shovel. And I remember one person from our church was like, "Are you guys okay?" I'm like, "Doing great, just conducting a funeral service for cinnamon roll or honey or whatever the thing was called." And we do try to care for our animals.
Well, there's something about this though. Letting your compassion not be performative. Like when you actually have genuine interest in other people's lives. When you actually can commit and show up. I think showing up for people is just the biggest thing. Like that's one huge way that I have felt so loved by our church community is just people showing up and saying like, "Hey, we're here."
What's that line? They're like, you can pretend to care.
Yeah.
But you can't like pretend to show up or whatever.
Yeah.
Like showing up
when
is
you're
where
there,
the proof is in the pudding.
So I mean, in general, just put, where are you putting your focus? Where are you putting your energy? Where are you keeping your eyes? If we're constantly looking at other people and, oh, what do they have? And, keeping up with the Joneses, that's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so just continue to cultivate and put energy where it needs to be. And so, obviously with the Lord and then with the people who are just right in front of you, whether that's the people inside of your home or your apartment, whoever it is.
All right. Well, hey, let's keep going. The Proverbs transition in the next significant chunk talks about words. In previous podcasts, we've talked about how our words reveal what's in our hearts. So we won't unpack that fully today. But if you look at verses 13, 14, and 18, it talks about how words produce real consequences. Verse 13 and 14 say, "Evildoers are trapped by their sinful talk, and so the innocent escape trouble. From the fruit of their lips, people are filled with good things, and the work of their hands bring them reward." Verse 18 says, "The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." And so the image there is evil speech creates snares and eventually traps the speakers. What's so interesting about today is that most of our words are typed and posted.
Right.
They aren't necessarily always spoken. So people keep receipts. Servers keep receipts. People can go back in your X or your Instagram history and take screenshots and go, "Oh, you said this," which is right now when we record this, kind of heading towards the midterms of a political season. So you're just watching people unashamedly like trash each other. And they're pulling up stuff from way past, like, "Oh, you're saying A now, but you said Z last year." And I have to think before I speak. And even in doing these podcasts, like people can
100%.
take stuff out of context and whatever. 100%. So how are we doing this? And are we honoring God with what we say? Because the truth is the whole idea of words piercing like swords is a real thing.
Yeah.
We can all remember things that were said to us that were positive.
Yeah.
Like I love when I'm watching like Monday Night Football or the Olympics or something like that, and they're interviewing an athlete, and they're like, "I remember in second grade when Mrs. Ramirez said," you're going to be great, Johnny. You just keep going. And he's like, and then Mrs. Ramirez is like in the crowd cheering him on.
And a poster.
It was someone's speech that blessed them that then had real meaning.
Yep.
Words have great effect. On a negative note, take Adolf Hitler. He literally corrupted media, owned how speech was being shared and spread. MLK Jr., exact opposite. He used the power of words to help people bring about real lasting change.
Yeah.
So keep going. You want to talk about justice, community, stability?
Yeah. So that's one of the things I think, just like any other repeated thing, just starts to become a part of culture, like whatever community you're in. And so I'm super blessed at Emmanuel. They're, one of the things that you can see, you can hear, you can feel when you come on campus is just the wide embrace that Emmanuel has in our community. And so people often will testify at Thanksgiving, and they'll say, that they came, their kids came through the preschool, or maybe their kids came through VBS, and they were just poured into and loved on, and, blessing was spoken over them and their family. And so that culture that you're a part of, it is individual people speaking, but it's also just like the ethos of the area. Like it's just the atmosphere on campus. And so that's true in so many school, apartment buildings. It starts in the heart, and it starts with that interior life, like we said, but then out of the tongue, and then it shapes the environment. It really does. And so in verses 17 and 22, you're going to understand some of these things: that honest testimony upholds righteousness, that false witness spreads deceit. I'm sure some of you can just recall these moments in your life. Maybe you've been a part of a conversation, or maybe you've had conflict. I know I have, where, language and speaking or not speaking, because there's some of that in here too, silence, where it's like, there's power in that.
Absolutely.
And then we understand too that the Lord delights in faithful speech. And so when you do speak, how you speak and speaking up, there's a delight in that in the Lord. And then we understand too that truth sustains relationships and communities. So there's something about, lying that just corrodes the trust in our relationship. And so truth, even, when it's hard, but it's spoken in love and with grace, how really it upholds relationships. Totally. It really does.
And I think verse 19 really adds to what verses 17 and 22 are saying.
Yeah.
In that truthful words determine stability over long periods of time.
Yeah.
And so the language of verse 19 are truthful lips endure, lies are fleeting and unstable, truth lasts, deception eventually collapses under reality. Like a house of cards, deception eventually falls. And I think if you were to do your own research and look around, you can see countries that have been blessed with systems that are fairly had integrity a little bit. There's checks and balances to some extent, and then those that didn't. You can see that in states. You can see that in cities. And so our goal is that we would always, as a church, just be promoting what's real and true and good and godly for the well-being of God, His church, and for our neighbor. Verses 24 and 28 keep going. This has been a common theme throughout the book of Proverbs that talks about diligence and laziness. It says diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. The Hebrew word here for anxiety means a deep stress you feel when something that's important to you is put at risk. And so I think there are many things in life that feel important.
Yeah.
However, when we rely on God the most, it means that everything else feels less fragile, and we don't need to white knuckle and control all these things as much.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean anxiety will go away. Paul even tells us in 2 Corinthians 11, he feels anxious for the churches that he loved and planted. So this proverb reminds us that we don't handle this alone. We go to God, and we need a kind word and encouragement from other people. That's what that verse 25 says. Anxiety weighs a heart down, but a kind word from somebody else will cheer you up. And so the diligence in this passage is not a frantic striving. This ties into what we've already said. The diligence, the image that comes with diligence is that of a rootedness. It's out of a tree. It's tending to what is right in front of you. And in verse 27, the diligent person values what they've earned, treats his provision as precious. Now, do we idolize these things and like cling to them? No, but we take care of them. The Bible would use steward. You're a good steward if you're a diligent person. A lazy person, on the other hand, can't even finish what they started. It's like going hunting, killing an animal and not cooking it. It's like starting something but not finishing it. One who is diligent commits, the one who is diligent completes. I think about Jesus. If you're looking at this through the lens of the gospel, Jesus is the one who came from heaven to the manger, to life, to ministry, and then set his face towards the cross in Jerusalem. Yeah. And then when he was done in John 13:1 in 19:30, he literally said, "It is finished."
Yeah.
He came to finish what he started. He completed his mission and his call. And so with this, there's also, in the Hebrew language, there's a subtle moral dimension here, because the Hebrew word for lazy is actually related to the word deceit. So oftentimes you think lazy just being like a bum and laying on the couch and not working hard. Here it says a slack bow is treacherous. Laziness is not just inactivity, it's a kind of unfaithfulness. It's like where you make a promise, but you don't follow through. Like someone's banking on you to back them up, and then you're not there. Diligence, on the other hand, when you think of Jesus, is covenantal. It keeps its word. It shows up. It's faithful. It's steady. And I celebrate that.
Yeah. There's something else that's produced within a diligent person. And so what we understand is that joy is produced. And there's actually the ability then to lead others. And so this is one of those things that if you really dig, so we're seeing things at a surface level, you know, like, oh, I see someone working hard. I see someone not working hard. I see, like, sometimes some of the language here is pretty like sloth.
Yeah.
And like, that's pretty obvious to the eye language. But what you're understanding here is that there's a diligence and a discipline that's happening that is actually forming character.
Yeah.
And so if you're willing, you know, to wake up. So Paul talks about this too, and how we train our bodies. Like he talks about almost like athletic language sometimes, and how there's this mindset, you know, that also sounds like renewing your mind. That's I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep trusting. I'm going to keep waking up and doing these things. That out of that, yes, there's a visible component to it, but more than that, there's an interior component and strength that gets built up from these disciplines. And so there's a book out. I've only read a little bits and pieces of it, but I love the idea of it. It's actually ancient wisdom. And so it's by the writer of Habits of the Household, Justin, I can't think of his name.
I remember the book. I don't remember the author's name.
So his newest book is called The Body Teaches the Soul. And so I think, and the idea in that though is very similar to this, that sometimes like it's hard for us to wrap our minds around something or, you know, to actually call Holy Spirit's help and empowerment into self-control. It's so pivotal because in doing these just repetitive things with our body in a diligent way, it's actually self-disciplining and giving us that self-control to be able to move forward. And then why that's so pivotal is because when you can do that with yourself, it's going to become so much more, I don't want to say easy, but so much more manageable when you start doing it with other people. Because that's the thing about a family context is if I'm able to do that with myself and my kids are seeing that, like we talked about in earlier chapters, like it's you know, it's being caught, not taught all the time, then those are the things that are getting passed down. And that's what's getting handed down over a legacy and generation. And so the gift of it really isn't what's seen all the time on the outside and the different ways that we're serving. The gift of it actually, and how it really honors the Lord too, is what's cultivated within our character and in our inner person. And so it's easy to, I think, to like pinpoint and see, but really the inner working of what's going on there when it's constantly submitted back to the Lord. So when, you know, this is done from a place of love, this isn't done from a place of just my moral standard and me having to will myself, but no, I get to do this.
Yeah.
It's a really good thing.
So practical examples of this would be like waking up early and beginning your day with God. In prayer and in studying of his word. Then that might be like the next kind of habit in place is like taking care of your temple, your body. It's a working out. And it leads to eating on time. And all of these things are geared towards the Lord.
Right.
There's a joy and a focus on him. So when you think about your habits and your rhythms of life, the motivation is fueled by love of God, love for God, love of other people.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, it is contagious. It starts with you. It leads to other people.
Yeah.
And not only spirituality, but then you're an integrated being. Your emotions, your body, your relationships, all these things financially are blessed. And then all of it's for the glory of God.
Right.
As you do that. So anyways, Proverbs 12, this is a fun one today.
It was fun. Thanks for journeying through this with us, you guys. I know it's a lot of hopping around, so it's a joy to be able to do that with you, though, within our community. We'll be back. We're continuing this book of Proverbs, so join us for chapter 13. God bless you. Have a good day.
The Lord bless you and keep you. Don't make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give him his peace. Have a great day.